We had several documents filed in the Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively case. First of all, let me apologize. I am not in my studio today, all soundproofed and acoustically pleasing. I am at a family member's home in the company of a couple of dogs that you may or may not hear throughout the course of this episode. But I'm already so behind on stuff I didn't want to wait until I was back home again. But if I put them in the other room, they're going to cry. So they will be here at my feet, moving around from time to time. Again, apologies. We're going to start right at the top with document 86, and it is a motion to dismiss from Leslie Sloane and Vision PR, which is her company, and she is the publicity agent for both Blake and Ryan. And I have to say, of all the documents to date, hers is by far the most acidic. Her claws are out, her back is arched, and she is hissing. This is Legal Updates with Cassidy. Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively, the angry PR wants out. Welcome. Besides of wanting to be dismissed from the lawsuit, she also wants to strike Exhibit A. Now, I've been going through Justin's amended complaint, page by page, and we haven't gotten to this exhibit yet, but I know most people who are interested in this case have probably already seen all or at least part of this exhibit. It's the timeline that Justin put together to complement his complaint. Now, he did this because in Blake's complaint, she had provided altered screenshots of texts, also texts missing context and important parts of the conversation. So a lot of what's found in there is adding the context or unaltered versions of these screenshots. Because his PR people were made to look like they were admitting something that was actually a sarcastic statement made after the important part of the conversation where it was clear that they were saying they did not do this. This was probably the most widely distributed exhibit in our days because it's really good evidence that a lot of the things that Blake said were in fact not true. Naturally, as Blake and Ryan's PR person and a defendant herself in this lawsuit, she would love to see this struck. The thing is, all of this stuff inside of it will probably be court exhibits. And even if it's struck from the record, it's not going to stop it being distributed. It's already out there, and as they say, the internet is forever. It just shows how much they want this document done away with. She uses Federal Rule 12b, 6, and 12f as the reason behind her being dismissed. She also uses the anti-SLAPP law, and she refers to New York's anti-SLAPP law specifically. Although this is a federal court case and must abide by federal rules, there are cases when state law is applied even in a federal case, one of them being diversity of defendants, as we have in this case. They are from multiple states. And we'll see her refer to New York state law quite a bit throughout this document. And we'll see the rulings where the judge applies state law or federal law as we go through this court case. Federal Rule 12b pertains to pretrial motions, and 12b-6 specifically deals with motions to dismiss for failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. Now, in practice, these motions are rarely successful, and even if it is dismissed, that may not be the end of it. There's dismissing without prejudice that allows you to request to amend your complaint, address the issues that are brought up in the motion to dismiss, and go on from there. Now, she's asking for a dismissal with prejudice. Now, that means, depending on the specifics, you would either have to appeal the decision or consider filing a whole new lawsuit with different claims. Federal Rule 12F is regarding motions to strike, and she's using this to strike that exhibit. But pleadings are seen in the court to be more favorable to the pleading party, and so because of that, these motions are also rarely granted. Now, what is this anti-SLAPP law? SLAPP refers to strategic lawsuits against public participation. This is a protection act from 2022, and it has to do with free speech. So if an action is shown to be within your free speech right, this would cause the complaint to be dismissed with prejudice. It also can be dismissed if you cannot establish essential elements. Now, in her preliminary statements, this is where the acid just flows. The way she describes the allegations against Justin are as if he's already been convicted of them. They're exaggerated, they're vicious. They state many things as if they're fact, and she applies one of the allegations that was actually made against Heath against Justin. And that's the allegation about Jamie Heath showing his wife's birth video. But here in this document, she says Justin showed Blake a video of a naked woman. So this is what I mean. Her descriptions just go beyond what's necessary. And much like Blake, apparently doesn't mind putting falsehoods in legal documents. Another false statement is she said that Baldoni does not deny the lion's share of misconduct for which he is accused. He has denied the majority, if not all of it. Did she even read this exhibit she's trying to strike? And even worse, she says that he suggests that Blake asked for it. Never was this even implied. She says that when Blake bravely spoke up about Baldoni's predatory behavior, that he and his team used every weapon in their arsenal to blame, embarrass, and silence her, going so far as to hire a crisis PR manager who promised to bury Miss Lively and destroy her life. She also accuses Justin of trivializing the sexual harassment and retaliation claims by recharacterizing it as a battle for creative control. Wait just a minute. Did she say trivialize? Did she just accuse Justin of trivializing? She says these are irrelevant and tellingly sexist. They're not irrelevant. They're one of many claims filed against Blake, including extortion. Neither side has only one claim against the other. There are multiple causes of action. Each one is relevant as the others. And sexist? I'm really getting tired of hearing Blake's side overuse this term. Not everything is about sexism. Some things are just about being a bad person, regardless of what your gender is. She minimizes Blake's behavior as saying she dared to offer input on the script, wardrobe, and editing, when we've seen the proof not just from Justin, but conversations with other members of the crew. The budget itself, we have the wardrobe consultant. I think we've seen extensive evidence on what her input was. We saw conversations with the editors and the producers, their words to describe Blake's actions and her takeovers. We saw them angry. We saw them sad. We saw them helpless. She didn't dare to offer input. According to what we read in those messages, it wasn't anywhere close to daring to offer input. She next states that she and her company were dragged into this as a smoke and mirrors exercise to distract, stating that other than the one New York Times article, they cannot plausibly connect her or her company to this lawsuit, and that they cannot identify a single malicious story that is part of their invented smear campaign. But going through the evidence, Leslie Sloane was the first one to fire a bullet. Before the New York Times article, before anything, the Daily Mail had started picking up on those so-called breadcrumbs that Blake was starting to drop. And although Jennifer Abel and Leslie Sloane had agreed for the sake of the film not to speak on any of what was going on, when asked by the Daily Mail, Leslie pounced on her chance to not only break the agreement, but to put all the blame squarely on Justin. And not in a small way, but by telling a news agency that the entire cast doesn't like Justin, that Blake had done nothing wrong, and then she made it even a bigger claim by saying the whole cast hates Justin. And once those words got out, that's when the entire thing exploded. We're talking about patient zero here. And then she gets comparative, saying that the amended complaint does not and cannot identify anything that she did that comes anywhere close to the communications between Justin and his own publicists. But this isn't about that. This is about her share in the mess. She then goes on to say that the Wayfair parties accused her of extortion but did not identify where the extortion occurred or how she received anything of value because of that extortion. As someone who works for Blake and Ryan, high-paying clients, the type of clients that she can brag about to get more clients, is definitely receiving something of value. She used those words to benefit her client, and that benefits herself. If she can do this satisfactory job for them, she gets to keep their business. If she were to lose their business, she would potentially lose more than just the money she makes from them. If word gets out that she lost such clients, she might lose more. And indeed, they've proven themselves to be the kind of people that would want to take others with them if they were to go. I would say that's pretty high value. Then she's back to pointing fingers about Justin's PR people by repeating allegations against Jennifer Abel saying that she wanted to plant pieces of how horrible Blake is to work with, and an alleged statement by Melissa Nathan that she can bury anyone. And she says that herself, by contrast, is not alleged to have spoken to the press until 4 days later, and saying that she had already off the record spoke to the editor of the Daily Mail. But we've seen that communication. She was refusing to speak. She was keeping her end of the agreement. Daily Mail reached out to her just like they did to Leslie. Jennifer kept her mouth shut. Leslie didn't. And as far as planting these pieces, that didn't take place at this time either. Leslie shot the first bullet. Had she not, no one can say what would have happened after that. Possibly nothing, because Justin's team was preparing in case his reputation came under attack. Their plan was defensive, not offensive. Leslie's was offensive. And now we get to the conversation that she had with the Daily Mail. Then she points to texts between Abel and the Daily Mail that happened after Blake released her administrative complaint on December 20th. This is half a year after Leslie spoke to the Daily Mail. After Blake released this, then Jennifer spoke to the Daily Mail. Daily Mail said, "We're hearing this, that Blake was difficult." So what was the motive for her making the statement? She's very angry about being linked with Harvey Weinstein, and even makes the accusation that this story was planted by Justin. This is not a new story. In fact, in the update where I shared this information, I got it from an article in 2014. The article plainly stated that Harvey Weinstein funded her agency. That was 11 years ago. It had nothing to do with this case or Justin. It was common knowledge, written about and reported about. Then she comes back to the legal standards, saying that a complaint must contain sufficient factual matter accepted as true to state a claim to relief that is plausible on its face. And so we're going to move into how she argues this. Her first point is that it has to be dismissed due to impermissible group pleadings. So this case is kind of messy because it has multiple plaintiffs and multiple defendants. And these plaintiffs and defendants are from different walks of life. So it is in fact an unusual grouping together. It was all recently put together into one singular case, and so these complaints may require to be amended multiple times to get everything just so. And so she spends quite a bit of time splitting hairs about how can this one be grouped in this claim and little details like that. These things can be worked out in amendments, but none of them prove her innocent of these allegations against her. But this is typical to see in these kinds of documents, that attorneys will focus on any tiny little error as a means to pick apart the validity of a complaint. She does the same with the claim of extortion, saying that she had no part in this. So probably in the next amendment, they would need to focus a little bit more on the role that she played with both the Daily Mail and with the New York Times, that played any kind of role in Blake being able to do the things that she was able to do that qualify as extortion. But we're not going to get too deep in that. Some of the easy remedies to this kind of stuff is, if necessary, to just exclude her from the causes of action that they cannot specifically put her to. That doesn't mean exclude her entirely from the whole lawsuit. And so because of that, we're not going to dive too deep into these arguments that she's made that declare the complaint to be too vague or to not fully support the cause of actions against her until we get to the claim of defamation. In another case I'm covering, the Buster Murdoch case, which is a defamation case. We just read a federal ruling about that, and it talked about the federal grounds for proving defamation. There are several things that make a defamation claim invalid. One is an inactionable opinion. Another is if the statement is actually true. And then we get a term that we're going to talk about a little bit more, a little bit later, and that's actual malice. Then we have to consider whether or not it gave rise to actual damages. So she's using this to the statement that she denies having any part of, and that was that Blake was sexually assaulted. And she moves on to her next point, and this is back to the point she started with before, saying that these statements do not concern 6 of the 7 Wayfarer parties. But let's look at that for a minute. Who are these parties? They're Justin. This affects him for sure. Jamie Heath. He's also been accused of some of these things. Steve Sarowitz. He's the financier, co-founder of Wayfair. It for sure affects him. Then we have Melissa Nathan, who is actually the only one out of the 7 that this doesn't directly harm. She called Jennifer Abel a liar, and she broke the agreement that she and Jennifer had to not speak out about this in order to not harm the movie. So instead of saying it doesn't affect 6 of the 7, she's got that backwards. It does affect 6 of the 7. Now, still trying to show there's not actual malice here, because that's an important basis for a defamation claim, I feel like she speaks out of both sides of her mouth with this. On one side, she claims it's an inactionable opinion, and then later she's going to say it's true. If it's true, that's a statement. You can't say opinions are true. Opinions are just viewpoints of the one speaking. They're not considered fact. So it can't be both things, like she tries to claim in this document. So first she goes with the opinion, and she spends a few paragraphs trying to prove that what she said was just opinion. But let's look at her words again. She calls presumably Jennifer Abel a liar. Then she says the whole cast doesn't like Justin, that Blake did nothing wrong. And then she comes back even stronger, saying the whole cast hates him. That's not how you express an opinion. An opinion is, I think the cast hates him, or it seems like the cast hates him. Those are opinions. Those aren't as if you're stating fact. But she stated as fact. She also tries to say it's personal sentiment. Personal sentiment is, I hate him. I don't see how the cast doesn't hate him. Not the whole cast hates him. Do you see the difference in these sentences? Then she calls them hyperbolic. Well, hyperbolic is extremely exaggerated, to the point that you would realize it can't be. So, for example, if she were to say, everyone who's ever worked with Justin ends up hating his guts, that's hyperbolic. And most of us, if we hear that statement, we could easily surmise, well, that's a big, broad statement to make. Surely not everybody he's ever worked with hates him. It's easy to see that's exaggerated. But her statement is not considered a hyperbolic statement. If you hear someone say the whole cast hates them, it sounds believable. It doesn't sound exaggerated, especially when you're talking about a small cast like this. Think about how few cast members there are. It's really a stretch to say that saying the whole cast hates him is a hyperbolic statement. Then she goes on really trying to push for this whole opinion, using things like acts like a psychotic nutcase, extremely unprofessional. Yes, those qualify for what she's trying to say, but that's not the type of statement that she made. And then she gets caught up in this sexual assault situation. On one hand, saying it's insufficiently precise means different things, and on the other hand, saying it's true. Basically saying that it's true that Justin sexually assaulted Blake, as if that's been proven. Then she's saying that the Wayfarer parties do not deny the truth that the whole cast hates him, and saying that Blake and the cast shunned him. Now, we don't know how they feel now that a lot of this has come out. We know that at the time of the premiere, she was inviting them to Deadpool celebrations. She was taking them out to dinner. She was bizarrely calling herself Isabella's mom, constantly with her hands all over her, holding her hand, arms wrapped around her, speaking for her, not letting her breathe, love-bombing them, introducing them to the likes of Hugh Jackman, dressing Isabella in her expensive clothes, and obviously saying things that shifted the feeling of these people towards Justin. These people have no claims against Justin themselves, except for, it seems to be Jenny. So what changed their attitude from the time they stopped filming a long time before and then being willing to unfollow him and shun him along with Blake? It wasn't anything they themselves experienced, so it had to have been something that was said to them by Blake. But who knows now what they think? We know that Blake's own brother-in-law took back statements that he made against Justin. We know that none of them have put down on paper any claims of their own against Justin. And we haven't seen if any of them are testifying. And I think that if they truly hated him, we would see some more of that. Perhaps the love bombing and the exciting things that they got to do with Blake, coupled with what she may have been telling them. And I don't know about you, but if some woman that you look up to comes to you and presents a story of some horrible things that a man did to her, if at the time I don't have reason to question her, I'm going to believe her and I'm going to think that man's a monster. Because why would she lie about something like that? As I've said, this is the first woman I've ever had doubts about her accusations. And I haven't said that I believe nothing happened. I'm still waiting to make a final determination on that. As of now, I think a lot of her claims have been proven to be false. And once someone has found to be a liar, I find it hard to believe other things that they say. So for me to believe the rest of the claims that are still undecided out there, I'm going to have to see proof before I can decide that all of the claims are false altogether. So it very well could be that these people believed it. Some of them didn't film at the same time. Young Lily, Young Atlas filmed completely different time. Blake was nowhere to be found when they were filming. They also knew that Justin would go to Blake's home late at night and work on writing and laying things out, which is also interesting. If you are made to feel so uncomfortable on the set where you have to show up to work, why are you inviting the man that you're telling everyone is a creep and you feel keeps eyeing you up inappropriately? Why are you inviting that man into your home night after night, deep into the night, with your 4 children? Some of the time, your husband's not even in the same country, just the 2 of you working on this. Why are you inviting this man with you and your children on your private plane to fly for hours from New York to LA? On commercial jets, that's like 4 to 5 hour flight. I don't know what it is in a private jet. Does that make sense? This man makes me so uncomfortable. I'm going to go up in a plane where I have no escape, not just me, but my 4 little children, 3 of them daughters. And now I've drifted way far off the topic. And so she reiterates that this defamation claim must be dismissed because all of Miss Sloane's alleged statements are inactionable opinion or statements of fact that are substantially true. And I disagree with that. She then says the sexual assault comments, which she also denies, by the way, but she says they're insufficiently specific, that defamatory statements must be identified with specificity. I think if someone's accused of sexual assault, I don't think you need anything more specific than that. And now we get to this actual malice that I said we would get to later. So this was born out of necessity. We have the First Amendment right of free speech. But you know what? If you just leave that by itself, there's a lot of nasty people in this world. You can't have anything that just absolutely gives freedom because it will be abused. And of course it was. So in 1964, the Supreme Court made a ruling which involved, ironically enough, the New York Times. It was the New York Times versus Sullivan. And out of that case came the necessity that the First Amendment must come with a defamation law or a limit to free speech. Most laws are associated with not being allowed to harm other people, whether it be physically or emotionally. And so that's what defamation is all about. Yes, you have free speech, but you may not use it as a weapon or a means of harming another person, because then you are infringing on their rights. So what does actual malice mean? It means the person who said something knew that that statement was false or demonstrated reckless disregard. So what is reckless disregard? It means that you're aware of facts that make clear that the person speaking simply didn't care about the truth of the statement or statements in question. So for example, relying on a source that you know to be unreliable. And then here's a very important part. Or had ulterior motives for publishing the statement. So let's think about why Leslie Sloane made the statement she made, as I call it, the first bullet fired, or patient zero. Why did she make this statement? It was to defend her client. Is that an ulterior motive? Yes. It's a financial motive. It's a business motive. She did it all to save her client's reputation and put the blame on Justin. There's actual evidence that she made the statement. It's in black and white, undeniable. She made the statement. Now all Justin has to prove is this ulterior motive for speaking it. And that's plain as day. We can all see that. She said this knowing it was harmful to Justin, but her motive was to save her client. How is she going to deny that? And then claims the Wayfarer parties failed to meet the high bar to prove actual malice. I don't think so at all. I don't know what the judge might find, but if I were to guess, I don't think so. Then she says that the Wayfarer parties failed to allege special damages, and that is the loss of something having economic or pecuniary value, which must flow directly from the injury to reputation caused by the defamation. And I can't even believe they put this to paper. Are you kidding me? It was her statement that sparked this entire thing. What has already happened to Justin financially? He's already lost a lot. He may never be able to come up from this. He may never be trusted to be a director again. So it's very easy to see future loss, as well as things he's already lost. He was dropped by his agent. A lot of his future projects are just kind of hanging in limbo. This is way off, in my opinion. Then she says it fails to state a claim for false light. So what is false light? It's like defamation, but where defamation rewards for harm to reputation, which leads to loss of other things, false light rewards for emotional and personal harm. false light is also easier to prove than defamation. It just requires things that are highly offensive to a reasonable person. So this is really a low bar, especially compared to defamation. But imagine the personal harm and emotional harm that's come to him. I mean, in his marriage alone. And speaking of which, I don't know how the Mrs. Baldonis have kept quiet. Justin's mom and Justin's wife. If I were either of those women, I would probably be behind bars for what I would do to Blake. Starting with how dare you, and you don't even want to know what I would do next. But it's interesting in their footnote that they said they must have referred to the plaintiff in his professional role for something to be defamatory. But this is another statement that I'm just like scratching my head going, how in the world do you even put this on paper? They're talking about a man in his role as a director. How do we know that? Because they referred to the people as cast. She didn't say this group of random people. She didn't say your friends. She didn't say the people you rode the train with today. She called them cast. When referring to them as cast, what capacity is that? That's them at work. If you have a cast, you have a director. How is that not referring to him in his professional capacity? And then back to this false light claim. She says that the Wayfarer parties failed to allege that Miss Sloane made any statements that would be highly offensive to a reasonable person. I'm sorry. For any of you who have been in any kind of position of authority, I've been a director, not in film, but of different educational organizations. Would I be offended if someone were telling someone that all of my employees hated me? I would probably cry. I wouldn't just be offended, I would be devastated. Maybe I'm not the most reasonable person, I'll give you that. But I think most people would be hurt and offended to be told that the entirety of their employees hated them. And then she comes back to the anti-SLAPP law and says that all of Wayfarer Party's claims fail as a matter of law. But remember, the qualifier for the anti-SLAPP is that if it's shown to be within free speech. But as we learned, the defamation rule came in as a qualifier to free speech. You cannot use your right to free speech to harm someone else by defamation. Then she comes back to this timeline, Exhibit A, saying that she wants it struck. She calls it an unsigned, one-sided factual narrative containing selective excerpts of emails and text messages with numerous redactions and alterations, including text, underlining, and other annotations. They were a response to Blake's evidence, where she altered texts and had very incomplete conversations to make them look like something that they weren't. He provided full context, and the reason for his annotations were to show the full story compared with what Blake had shown. And she goes on to point out all the ways that she doesn't feel that it qualifies as an exhibit. The last one being calling it irrelevant and saying it has no real bearing on the case, which I think most of us who've read it would highly disagree with that. And that likely most, if not all of it, will be actual court exhibits. Then in the footnote, she asks again for dismissal with prejudice. Remember, that's the qualifier. That means you can't just simply amend it, but you will probably have to appeal or file a whole new complaint with different matters. But her reasoning, she says the flaws in this pleading are incurable. And again, I disagree, because as I brought up a lot of the reasons why throughout this coverage of this document. So that is the end of this document. I'm not going to cover all of them in this one. I wanted to get this one out first. But in addition to this, there's a summons for Jed Wallace. Remember, that's the crisis management man down in Texas. We just covered him in the last update. There's a proposal for a protective order that comes with 3 separate exhibits that we'll also consider in the next episode. Till then, this is Cassidy O'Connell saying stay well and stay tuned.